Okay, so if the U.S. has overinvested, but managed to somehow contain Iran to some extent, and we'll see what happens next. But as we sit here, Iran is pushing back against attempts to do a negotiation.
Right.
What does this skepticism, maybe is fair, or desire not to overinvest translate into when you look at Iran policy? How does that general feeling manifest itself in that policy towards Iran?
I'm glad you asked the question because it gives me an opportunity to talk about my book. And in my book, I wrestle with precisely this. And what I say is that the United States should contain and deter the Iranians.
But that takes a lot of
right,
effort, right?
Right, but those are things that...
Doesn't it take a lot of investment to do that?
Yes, but I'm for investing in the region to the extent that we will have a return on our investment.
Okay.
So the example I always use is, I say to people, well, what's less expensive in terms of dollars spent?
Yes.
And you know this, you spend a lot of time in the region, both officially and unofficially. Ensuring the free flow of energy resources out of the Persian Gulf, or promoting democratic change in Egypt, for example.
Right.
Clearly, ensuring the free flow of energy resources out of the Persian Gulf is more expensive in terms of dollars spent than a bunch of democracy and governance programs for Egypt.
Right.
But what's more feasible? What has a better chance of actually succeeding?
Right.
The free flow of energy resources. So, to my mind, it's money well spent to deter and contain the Iranians. I recently published a piece that was kind of radically counterintuitive to basically the two camps, or the binary way in which Washington looks at the Iran problem. Folks are all in on either negotiations or on a military strike.
Right.
My view is that's kind of, both are overinvested in Iran and don't get us where we want to be. Okay. What we want is, we want this terrible regime to collapse in on itself and let the Iranian people take matters into their own hands. So if the president succeeds in his goal he's basically handing a lifeline to one of the world's worst regimes.
Right.
Military strike may also do the same thing, creates a rally around the flag effect, unless you actually are sure that you can take out the regime in Iran. And I don't think anybody, talk about being overinvested, I'm not sure anybody really wants to do that. But to my mind, both things carry with them an enormous risk of extending the life of the regime. And it's the regime that makes Iran's nuclear program so dangerous.
Yeah.
So yes, it's a risk. It could be 3 weeks or 30 years for the Iran. But I think deterrence and containment is actually a wiser course of action. There is, look, people by and large in the foreign policy community in Washington are liberal internationalists. They believe at one point or another in the positive use of American power around the world.
Right.
But I think that there has been a lot more reflection about America's role and what was appropriate and what's not appropriate than I think Rhodes was giving people credit for, or others talking about the Washington consensus. But the idea that we kind of, as a group, kind of single-mindedly think very similar things, I think is inaccurate.
Yeah, I don't think the facts bear it out, right?
No. Rhodes' entire time in Washington were 8 years in the White House.
Right.
That's a place that can breed a lot of groupthink. And in fact, it did on the signature issue of the JCPOA.
Yeah.
To a person who worked on that issue during the Obama administration, they will say to you, there was no better deal. There was no better deal.
Right.
I think President Trump is in the process of testing that proposition, but others have come up with ideas that might have been better or should have been included in the JCPOA. I'm one of those analysts. I didn't get spun up one way or the other about the JCPOA.
Right.
I thought that the hunch at the heart of the deal, that the Iranian regime would be different by the time those clauses sunset, was wrong. Was wrong. Yeah. They deny that there was a hunch, but if you read what Rhodes himself has written, what Phil Gordon has written and said,
or Bill Burns,
they all had this hunch that at the end of the 10, 12, 15 years, it would be a very different Iran.